everybody, welcome back to the Noel Casler podcast, episode 133. Coming to you from the Hudson Valley. Broke out the craviola for you guys tonight. Not sure if you've ever seen one of these. Some of you guys have. Part of my weird collection. Anyway, let's get to it. How's everybody doing? Let me turn this one mic down. There you go. That's a cool guitar, huh? I love that guitar. It was made in the Matsumoto factory in Japan in the late 70s. It's a copy of an Italian instrument called a craviola, which is like a guitar with a funny shape. Bill Withers was famous for playing one. The great Bill Withers, who I got to meet when he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And it was one of the thrills of my lifetime. I've told that story before on this show, so I won't bore you with it now, but I got it out of respect for Bill. And it's a favorite. It was hanging up out in the studio, and I pulled it down off the wall a few months ago, and I haven't been able to put it down when I'm not writing and screaming and freaking out over the state of the world, as many of us are these days. And I just wanted to check in with you guys. I know it's been a while. I appreciate everybody who signed up on Patreon. That's where I'm going to put my podcast now, and it's free. There's no commercials. You don't have to sign up to watch it. Didn't want to do the YouTube thing anymore. I don't want to diss anybody who's supporting me over there, and maybe I'll throw this up on YouTube, but instead of watching all those commercials, just come on over to Patreon. I'll put a link up there, and you can watch it on Patreon, or you can listen to it as you have been on Apple and all these other places that play podcasts. Not that the world needs another podcast, right? Too many podcasts, not enough protests. But as I like to say. But I'm just joking. But we had some protests. We had the No Kings protest. That was definitely something that got under Trump's skin, and that was very heartwarming to see that. I was out in Ridgefield with my local resistance chapter. They do some good work over there. I'm not part of them, but they invited me personally, and I like what they're doing. So I was over in Connecticut, and it was a good day. And then it was over, and now we're back where we are, and Trump's threatening a third term, and a lot of people are still asleep to the dangers we face. And, you know, he's not joking about that. I know it's been in the news the last couple of days because he's saying it on Air Force One over there in Asia, but he's not kidding. And that's exactly what he's going to do, and he's setting the stage for it right now. He's saying there's radical left terrorists. He's going to, you know, he's got a lot of people supporting him. Senators are starting to throw these sound bites, and congressmen are throwing these sound bites out there. And he obviously has, you know, Pete Hegseth and Stephen Miller and all these whack jobs, Kash Patel and the DOJ behind him, Pam Bondi. But what his play will be, in my opinion, will be to, you know, to say that radical left terrorists have taken over the country. He can't guarantee a fair election while they're out there, so he's going to stop them. And, you know, once he stops them, of course, we'll either have a fair election or he'll appoint a successor or something, but he's not going to accept any results. Probably in a midterm scenario, and then beyond in the next presidential election. And if you think that sounds like hyperbole, or if the military's going to stop him, I caution you to guess again, because he got away with January 6th. He wasn't held accountable. There's, you know, new reporting coming out that Merrick Garland was slow rolling it even more than we all witnessed him doing. And he was doing that ahead of the midterms because he didn't want to appear that he was, you know, tilting the scales. Carol Leonnig has a new book coming out about that. And it was obvious to anybody who was paying attention, you know. But anytime you'd bring it up, you'd get attacked by the DOJ stands that were like, no, he's just taking his time and dotting his I's and crossing his T's. And, Even if that were true, time was not on your side, because this is what happens when Trump gets it back into power, and you're seeing it now. You're seeing sort of a lifetime of narcissism and, a sort of predator, demented, sadistic output or outlook come to full fruition in a madman who's 79 years old, drug addicted, probably half dementia, ridden at this point. His health is obviously failing. He was trying to play it off like he did a good job on his, cognitive tests at Walter Reed. They don't order MRIs because you did a good job. And they don't order MRIs because everything's perfect, as he liked to claim, as he claimed the other day. I mean, anybody who's ever been to the doctor knows that. I get MRIs all the time for different kind of things, and it's never like, hey, we think everything's absolutely great, so we're just going to send you into this machine. They do it to check for stuff. And, I don't get them all the time, but I've gotten them. I got them in rehab 20 years ago because they were checking my brain to see if there was any kind of damage from how much drinking I did. And I snapped back quickly. I'm happy to say. And, that was at NIH, and that saved my life. And that's 20 years ago next month, November, which begins on Sunday, I think, Saturday. And that program is probably not funded anymore. And that was the National Institutes of Alcoholism and Abuse. And they were taking people from all walks of life. I came down from Manhattan after not sort of getting a handle on how much trouble I was in drinking and ended up in the hospital and all this kind of stuff. I went to, a 30-day inpatient program that was paid for by the government. And it was a wonderful situation. And there was people who were unhoused, who were in the same program with me. It didn't matter. They were trying to help human beings. And the fact that somebody in recovery is now in charge of HHS and defunding NIH, I shudder to think about that opportunity not being available for other people. And that's just one thing they're taking away. They're taking away nutrition assistance on Saturday. SNAP benefits run out for 40 million Americans. And they think it's just this cliched, the other that they don't like, the famous Ronald Reagan racist trope of welfare queens and stuff. That's not who's getting SNAP benefits. It's people that are working hard and not making ends meet, or they, let them keep that cash for something else. Food should be a human right. It's absolutely ridiculous in a country as wealthy as ours to be holding that stuff from people, especially when Trump's raking it in. He's made $5 billion this year on crypto. He's sending 8 Navy warships to the Caribbean, right? How much gas does it cost to send them down there? And then they had to get out of the way of this Hurricane Melissa, which just ravaged Jamaica and Cuba, Haiti. People have died in all 3 of those islands. There's never been storms this large, this powerful, turning into monsters in a couple of days. So you don't even have enough time to really properly get out of the way or prepare. It's a nightmare scenario, and we're wasting money, playing war games and killing innocent fishermen in the Caribbean. They struck 4 boats at once yesterday, I believe, in the Pacific. The death toll's at 50 people now. People that he's just claiming are narco-terrorists. And I'll get into that here in a second, because Trump has no problem with drug dealers. I've been in the room where Trump was buddies with really famous drug dealers, guys who went to prison for selling methamphetamine, who ran motorcycle gangs, who made whole careers on being outlaws and gangsters, are among Trump's friends. He's got no problem with that. Don Jr. snorted enough cocaine to keep Bolivia in business for the rest of the decade. Everybody knows that. Look at the kid. You think all these rich white folks that Trump panders to in Palm Beach don't do cocaine? It's ridiculous. Or fentanyl. Nobody's doing fentanyl for fun. I guess people are now, but that's obviously a scourge. But blowing up innocent Venezuelans is not stopping it, and that's not where it's coming from anyway. It's coming from China, and Trump's over in Asia right now, kissing Xi's ass, and he got his ass handed to him in this tariff war, because now they put export controls on all the rare earth minerals and they control 90% of the market. And you can't build anything without them. You can't build a car, a computer, a submarine. You can't build weapons, right? We're dependent on them. And Trump started a tariff war for nothing and then lost his shirt on soybeans. And now apparently he's going to give away, there's these chips that NVIDIA makes. And if you read Noel's notes on Substack, which is where most of the work I do is these days, and I appreciate everybody who supports it, I talked about this case in the summer where Steve Witkoff and a couple other guys in Trump's administration, a couple other, sweethearts like Laura Loomer who stepped in on this deal and stuff. But basically, there's this sheik, and they met him on a yacht, on a mega yacht in the Mediterranean, and they cut a deal with him to sell him these highly sought after chips, these chips that they use in AI. And they tried to buy them during Biden's administration, and Biden wouldn't sell them because he's like, these guys do war games, and they share information with China. If China gets their hands on these, we're screwed. They could use them in AI and drones and all kinds of weapons we can't even think about yet, right? So Biden was like, no, I'm not selling those things to you. But Witkoff and the other guy who's the crypto czar, I can't think of his name right now, went and met this sheik and cut a deal with him, and they're selling him these chips. And then the next day, this guy invests $20 billion in Trump's World Liberty Financial Bitcoin. So it was a bribe, and we gave him to him, all right? It was a bad scenario. Now, apparently, there's a chip that's even more sought after than that NVIDIA makes. It's even more highly dangerous to let it out there. And Trump's apparently going to offer to sell these to China in exchange for getting them out of this mess with soybeans, for them to start buying soybeans again. That's absolute insanity. A senator from Connecticut pointed it out today on Twitter. I haven't done a deep dive on it, but you get the larger point. He's giving away sensitive materials that only we have to our biggest sort of economic military rival, even obviously more so in Russia, because they're a paper tiger when it comes to any economics, but China's not, So this idiot is doing the most unstrategic, ridiculous things that are going to hurt our security and line his pockets. And that's what he's been doing. That's what this is. That's why Putin backed him in 2016, in 2020, and 2024. If you want to hurt the United States, you put that guy in charge. And that's what we're seeing. The only thing that's shocking about it is how quickly it's happening. Because it's happening so fast that most people can't even keep up. A lot of people can't even catch their breath. It's hard to cover. That's why I'm not doing this stuff all the time. I don't want to be the kind of podcast that's just showing you his tweets and breaking down the news for you. There's plenty of people doing that. I want to talk about how I'm getting through this, knowing what I know about this guy, and knowing that I'm a human being who is sentient and empathetic and in recovery, and I have resentments. It's personal to me. This guy's attacked friends of mine. I've seen the lives he's ruined. And to watch him get away with everything, and to watch people play along, to watch people acquiesce like all these corporations and media companies, which he's basically completely taken over. All these big deals. CBS is now getting, CBS News is being run by Barry Weiss. That alone is a nightmare scenario. John Dickerson's getting pushed out. They're bringing in Fox guys and the Foxlight guys on CNN. So you're going to be educating people, or not educating them. You're going to be propagandizing them with all this MAGA stuff for another generation or so. And we're already sleepwalking into this autocracy. We're already, we're made up of people who should know better, right? From all the generations that are active in America right now, and we're not rising to the occasion in the way we should. We should have work stoppages. We should have general strikes. We should have consumer boycotts on everything. You shouldn't be buying shit on Amazon. Jeff Bezos is not your friend. Microsoft is not your friend. Bill Gates just reneged on his climate change sort of policies, right? He just said yesterday, bad timing, with the hurricane bearing down on Jamaica, but he was just like, it's not really a threat to humanity. Yeah, some people in poor areas are going to get hurt, but it's not really an existential threat. It really is. And you can see that with your own goddamn eyes, and it's going to affect everybody. And even these billionaires who are building these safe houses underground and all this crazy stuff. I read a book on it, Evan Osnos wrote. Like, there really are legit bunkers and all these kind of things that people who can afford it are buying. But, that's stupid. That's not going to save you. Did you watch, if you hadn't, you should, this movie House of Dynamite on Netflix? Phenomenal. And it gamed out a scenario where we'd get a nuclear strike on the U.S. and then respond. And, it was brilliant because it was very, realistic in terms of how it would just play out. And that's what's also so scary about this moment is having idiots in charge, having Trump, who has no strategic forethought. He doesn't play chess. He doesn't think a couple moves ahead. And he's up against Putin, who's thinking 5 moves ahead, who's going to embroil him, in some kind of situation in Venezuela. Trump wants to attack Venezuela because he wants a cut of whatever's going on in the new government. He wants to attack Colombia because he wants a cut of the cocaine production. He doesn't care that they're producing drugs. He wants a piece of the action. That's what mob bosses do. They see who else is making money on the block, and they get a piece. And Trump sees South America as his block. He sees Canada as his block. That's why the first thing he did was come in and pick a fight with Canada, which is now escalated. Go Blue Jays. I want to see them win just because I don't, I don't want to curse, but it's embarrassing. It's just, it's beyond humiliating. But Trump is going to get pulled into something in Venezuela because Putin's now sending his mercenary Wagner troops down there, Wagner troops, whatever you call them, and if we put boots on the ground down there, they're going to get in these skirmishes. And then you'll have this sort of proxy war with Russia. And you think, well, Putin and Russia or Trump are kind of aligned. Why would there be a proxy war? Because it's still going to weaken America. And it's going to use our resources. And it's going to, distract people from what he's doing in Ukraine, from what corruption is going on with Trump and his oligarchs. And it's going to further diminish democracy, the world's largest and most powerful democracy, which has already been demeaned at the hands of Trump. And all these world leaders that are meeting him all the time and kissing his ass because they think it's going to work out for him, that's the wrong play. That is the wrong move. And I understand why they're doing it. I understand their responsibilities are to their home nations and their home economies and stuff. But that isn't going to work out well because he's a madman. You're never going to please him. He's just going to ask for more. The hole inside of his soul is not getting filled because you're kissing his ass or giving him a crown or a sword dance or all these other things. But everybody's doing it. What should alarm you? You should be like, where are the adults? Why can't somebody just stand up to him? Did you see him when he was in, with his peace in the Mideast, which is gone, right? But the whole press and everybody's like, he deserves the Nobel, even though he was making people say it, they were saying it as if he'd achieved peace. There's no peace. 100 people were just killed the other day in Gaza. Netanyahu played him. Netanyahu's going to now have Trump defending, Israel basically, or getting embroiled in the West Bank so Kushner can build condos. And he did it by playing on Trump's desire to have a Nobel Prize. He's going to make that situation worse in the end. And the Palestinians are going to be 1,000 times worse off when this is over because of Trump. And he's so infantile and stupid, and he cannot understand the complexity of that region, which much greater minds than him have struggled to solve. And then you got Netanyahu, who's just an awful bad actor. And you got Hamas, who is a terrorist organization with basically good PR for a lot of progressives, because people are kind of forgetting, how much evil occurred on October 7th, because they had the sympathy of the world right away. And I'm not excusing, what's happened since. It's ridiculous. The death and the the bloodshed and the human suffering that's happening on this planet right now. If you look at Sudan, there's things that are making experienced people who study this stuff retch at the horror. And it's happening right now. And we're not doing anything about it. It's not in the headlines here in the U.S. because we've abdicated our role. And the only time we step forward is something like that, where it's Trump bloviating that he's about to solve 8 wars. He's not solving anything. Right? Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff are cutting deals and getting played by Netanyahu because they're seeing dollar signs. They don't care about the people on either side. You know, and I feel sorry for both sides. And I feel sorry for anybody in Israel who thinks Trump is on their side because they're going to get screwed too. And they're living under, you know, their version of Trump. And he goes over there and says to the Knesset, hey, what's the big deal about some champagne and cigars? Because corruption is his way of life. And you're going to end up with this multipolar world with a Russia, a China, you know, all these sort of, you know, Hungary, all these mini dictatorships, UAE, KSA, Israel, if it stays with Netanyahu and whoever they cut deals with. And there's going to be all these bad actors filling their own pockets, doing whatever they're doing with impunity and not calling each other out on it because there's nobody to step up and say this is not how we do it in the world. And that's why the UN gets diminished by Trump. That's why NATO gets diminished by Trump. You know, after World War II, we had these treaties and alliances because we didn't want it to happen again. You know, we wanted to figure out a way where we could all sort of communicate and work together to stand against aggression. And now Trump is appeasing the aggressors and kissing their asses like they're the good guys. And now he's talking about how he's going to make peace with Kim Jong-un and South Korea. Like, it's insanity. It's a cartoon, but it has real-world repercussions. And you see that every day. Just focus on the economy here. Our government's been shut down for 5 weeks. No one even talks about it anymore. It's not opening back up before Christmas. I promise you. Mark my words. There's no motivation to open it back up. They don't want the Epstein files released. They don't want, you know, Speaker Johnson. I don't even like to call him Speaker. That little jockey, lying, fake Christian, man boy, kiss ass. They don't want him swearing in a duly elected congressman from Arizona who's already lost, like, you know, however many days, a month and a half out of her 15-month term. Because they know she'll be the final vote to release the full files on Epstein, and Trump's all over those files. So is Bill Gates, by the way. He's not all over them to the extent that Trump is, but he's in them. And that's probably why they got to him to switch his position on climate change. You know, there's a lot of people involved with that because that's what Epstein did. He collected compromise, and that's what Trump did. They were partners in this stuff. And Deutsche Bank and Putin and, you know, people in the Mideast were involved. Ehud Barak is apparently involved, former prime minister. I don't want to go down to a hole about all that, but, you know, it's Virginia Giuffre just, you know, basically named him and Prince Andrew and all this stuff in her book. And my friend who ended up in that place when she was groomed by Trump at 12 years old, he hit on her when she was taking lessons at his rink and later ended up in her teens, ended up there, you know? They were abusing girls. They were abusing women. They're criminals. And they were offering that service to powerful men who could do this stuff with impunity. That's the gig. That's what Epstein was involved with. That's what Trump was involved with. And there was a lot of other people in that orbit because there's cash involved and there's compromise, right? There's power. There's having something over the next guy. And that's how a lot of business gets done. Shady business. So they're not going to want that stuff coming out any further. They want to figure out how they can prevent it from ever coming out, you know? And having the government shut down is a good start. Trump has no motivation to open it up. He doesn't see it as something he needs anymore because he's signing everything by executive orders. And he's got private people paying the troops. Thomas Mellon, who's in the Epstein files. You know, I mean, I haven't read the files, but I've seen flight logs. I've seen documents. I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but like that guy's a kook. And that's why the kooks all go to Trump, because they know him and they know he's one of them. And there's a lot more out there than Trump, but they're not president, but now they got a guy who's president who's going to protect not only their proclivities, they're going to prosper under this guy. They're going to have gotten away with what they've gotten away with in life, and now they're going to control everything. Trump doesn't care that people are about to lose their, nutritional assistance. And now the Republicans are feigning outrage and acting like they care. They had already taken away a lot of that assistance to give another tax cut to billionaires. That's what the big, beautiful bill was, H.R. 1, right? They were already cutting this stuff to continue the tax cuts that he put in place in his first term. We have enough money to feed everybody. We have enough money that everybody could get health care. I went to my doctor yesterday for my yearly physical. It's the last time I'm getting to go on the current health insurance because I got a letter from the state that it runs out next July. The plan that I've paid into or purchased, under the ACA for 15 years. The only time as a freelancer I've ever had steady health insurance in my adult life was because of the Affordable Care Act, I never worked for a company that did benefits. I'm a freelancer, and there's a lot of people like me. Everybody's health insurance is going to go up if you even keep it to astronomical amounts. Why? Every other industrialized, wealthy democracy offers it free because it should be a human right. So they don't care about any of this stuff. And the weaker we get as a people, the stronger they get. Because the difference between the have and the have-nots is not just, health. It's not just food. It's education. It's upward mobility. It's the ability to do anything about it. To protect your own rights, to hire a lawyer, to go to college. To say, I'm going to grow up and go to college and I'm going to come back to my town and I'm going to sue that company that's been poisoning my community for generations, right? That path to righteousness is drying up before our eyes, and they know it. That's part of the plan. That's what Project 2025 is. That's what the Koch brothers and the Federalist Society, and the Libertarian Movement and the John Birch Society before that. That's what all this stuff is. All that free market capitalism, no big government, get out of the way. That's just greedy people looking to get over and exploit people. That's all it ever is. It's a few bad guys, or more than a few, but, it's a certain percentage wanting to control everybody else and wanting to make sure you can't do a goddamn thing about it. And Trump is the perfect beast for that. But the problem is he's crazier than even those guys realize. And it's going to screw everybody up. Our only hope is that he kicks the bucket. And he might. He's definitely not in good health. I'm going to be sticking, I want to see what's going to happen. But it doesn't even disappear overnight because it's becoming institutionalized. A J.D. Vance or somebody more disciplined in many ways will be more dangerous. He won't be quite the loose cannon, but once this stuff becomes the way, then what are you going to do about it? It's very hard to get out from under an autocracy, to get out from under a dictator. They can hand off that power, especially when it's so corrupted our institutions, and that's what they've done. They've torn down our institutions and replaced them with, with nothing, with oligarchs, with too much influence, with Elon Musk's and these kind of lunatics and Peter Thiel and every congressman that's just bought and paid for, and a Senate that's abdicated its role a long time ago. Don't even get me started on the Supreme Court, which he bought. Thanks Mitch McConnell, Citizens United. Thanks 3 appointments in Trump's first term. So here we are. And you have to think about, you have to understand who Trump is, which I think anybody who listens to this podcast does, and most people do. But you have to understand the culture that's created him, and the kind of people that cheer this on. They're not paying attention to this. They don't really understand the fine points. They're busy mourning Charlie Kirk and thinking how the left is trying to make everybody transgender and all these stupid talking points that are fed them every night by these smarmy, Fox News frat bros and their stupid podcasts and all this hyper-masculine, toxic iconography bullshit that they're all buying. They're cheering on ICE and these... Have you seen this Greg Bavino, whatever the freak his name is, this little Nazi guy with a little Nazi haircut, and his Hitler salutes and stuff? This is insane. They're abusing American citizens on the streets of Chicago and California and Oregon and all over in Washington, D.C. And they're just getting started. They got a bigger budget than the Marines, ICE. They're purchasing guns. They're purchasing fucking rocket launchers. What do they need them for? Chemical weapons. They're literally like guided missiles. That's going to be Trump's private army, and he's going to use it against us. And the people that could be doing something about it are still asleep because they voted for him, because they got bullshitted that Biden was too old. Yeah, Biden was old, but his policies were going to work. They weren't going to hurt him like Trump is going to hurt them, right? We had a growing economy. Inflation was going down. Prices were still up. Yeah, you don't get everything overnight because we were digging out from what Trump did and a global recession. It's a little complicated, but we were on the right track. And now we're in a death spiral. We're in a death spiral. And we got to wake up to it. And we got to do it before it's too late. Now's the time, and we can do that by coming together. We can do that by, raising our awareness and raising our voices. Hope is not lost. This is not the time to give up and go hide under the bed. Okay? This is the time to figure out what you can do to align yourself with a positive response to this. And if that means just working on yourself so you don't get consumed by this anger, then that is helping. That is resistance. I follow Thich Nhat Hanh. I read a lot of his stuff. He was a Vietnamese Zen Buddhist who came of age in Vietnam and then got exiled from Vietnam because he was choosing peace between both sides, the communists and the American-backed government. And, he's sort of a man without a nation. And then he went to France and started a monastery. And he's the one who brought the plight of the boat people to the world. And he's done all these good things, but basically it starts with you. It starts with your breath and not feeding that anger, increasing your awareness. Because if you do that, if you practice mindfulness, and you do that by just focusing on your breath and trying to get out of your head and trying to not get in that spiral that we're all getting in, that, by the way, your phone just puts you in. The phone is like a pain body, if you read Eckhart Tolle, And it does it to me every day, every morning and every night. I get all pissed off looking at that stuff, right? But if you can go beyond that, sort of go beyond your mind and focus on your awareness and where your feet are in this moment and that sort of thing, then you have a chance because you're going to get in touch with something bigger than yourself. Eckhart Tolle will talk about that, the power of now. Thich Nhat Hanh talks about it in terms of interbeing. If you read Rumi or you read any kind of, Gary Zukov back in the day, I don't know if any of you guys know who he is, or, Anthony DeMello, who's one of my guys, who's about, he's a Jesuit priest, big influence on me, is about, dropping attachments, dropping your desires, Buddha, right? And it's about being present, understanding reality, seeing reality for what it is, and sort of accepting where you are, right? Sort of giving up that inner resistance so you can actually make a change. You can actually do something about it. And peace begins within us. That's where you find peace. If you're at war with yourself in anger, you're not really going to be able to change anything on the outside. And that sounds like a paradox, right? Because how can you not be angry looking at this stuff? And I get that. But you have to find a way to practice. You know what I mean? You got to find these activities that allow you to wake up and to wake other people up. That's why they go after music. That's why they go after the arts, because the arts reflect our humanity. The arts is like the one thing they're scared of. It's no accident that Trump went after the Kennedy Center and the museums and everything. He doesn't want people to understand who they really are. Most certainly his followers, because they're the ones who've been in the cultural and intellectual drought for decades. But if you focus on yourself, I don't mean thinking about yourself and your problems. I mean your body, your cells, and your heart, and your breath, and your connectiveness to nature. Go out and spend time with the trees and the birds and the flowers. We're not on this planet alone, and we're fighting for all those other creatures that these guys don't give a damn about. Climate change isn't just about us. It's about all the fish in the oceans and the birds in the skies and all these animals. This place is paradise still, but it's going to get lost. We need an awakening, That's really the way out of this, is everybody's got to wake up to reality, to what's really going on and what we really have. And then we can do something about it, and that's our job. We can wake people up. It's a lack of enlightenment that is is allowing people to fall for somebody like Trump. And of course, we got to get down to the nuts and bolts of all the politics of it, right? But ultimately, that's not how we overcome it. We overcome it by transforming our characters and transforming sort of our humanity. We need to kind of raise our vibration, so to speak. If you want to get hippy dippy, that's why you feel good when you go to a concert. Anyway, I'm going to hop off now. I know this is a brief one, but I wanted to get on and just thank everybody on Patreon for listening and, let you know I miss you guys. I'm out there with you. I love you. I promise I'll get back here soon. Do me a favor, share this stuff if you want to. I'm not going to be putting it on YouTube, I don't think, so spread the word if you want to listen on Patreon, and check out Noel's notes on Substack. I'm slipping into my Delmarva accent. If you guys didn't see that series called Task on HBO, what a masterpiece. Really good. And they had that Pennsylvania accent, so I slipped back into it after watching it. Anyway, take care. Episode 133, Noel Casler podcast. I'll be back soon. Peace.